Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus. My co host Phyllis Zimler Miller cannot join us today. The Organization of the United Nations for the Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, made headlines after October 7. Israel accused the organization for having staff members who are linked to Hamas and banned the organization from operating in Gaza. We have the Israeli award-winning filmmaker Duki Dror as our guest today, and I'm very thrilled about that. His new important documentary, titled Unraveling UNRWA, was just launched. For anyone that cares about the Israeli-Arab conflict, this is a must-see documentary, revealing one of the main mechanisms fueling the conflict for generations. Duki, thank you so much for making the time to come on, and it's wonderful to have you. Welcome to our
My
podcast.
pleasure. Thank you.
So, when was your documentary launched?
I would say before October 7th, but not really. But after October 7th, it was a wake-up call for many people, of course, in the United States and Israel. And for me as a documentary filmmaker, it's like history knocked on my door, and I had to go out and really reveal how did we get to this point? How did we get to the point that these Hamas and Islamic Jihad swarmed into Israel in such a violent act, uh, creating this crazy, horrific massacre? What really sparked them? So I immediately was thinking about a book that I read in 2018, a book called The War of Return, that was written by Dr. Einat Wilf and Dr. Adi Schwartz. And it's a book that really opened my eyes because I, as a part of the Israeli left, always thought I was thinking about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as a conflict about land and conflict, yeah, about narrative, of course, but basically, two-state solution. This is what we need to do in order to live securely and in prosperity, Israelis and Palestinians side by side. And after I read this book, I was completely unraveled, I would say, because what they showed in this book, it was a study they made, a historical study looking back from 1949 until they wrote the book, I think 2018 or 2017, how the Palestinian narrative of return after the 1948 war. After the 1948 war, there were 700,000 Arabs who became refugees and were either forced out or have been, evacuated themselves to outside of the territories Israel took over this war. In an act of war, of course, where seven armies of Arab states were attacking the small Jewish community in the Eretz Israel, in land of Israel. And these 700,000 people who were dispersed, war refugees, and they became today 6 million refugees. They continue to use the status of refugees from 1948, passed it to their children, who passed it to their children, who passed it to their children, and for four and now the fifth generations of Palestinians who had nothing to do with that war in 1948, they still considered as refugees. And this is the only example of refugeehood or status of refugee that is passed from generation to generation. And all that what they ask for through this Palestinian narrative is to go back to their villages, to their towns inside of Israel, where Israel is now a state, and basically really dismantling the Jewish state, which giving this right of for Palestinian refugees to return, which is unheard of in history after a war, except in different small parts of usually it's not really the case almost in any conflict in the world. There's a war, you became a refugee, and that's it. You have to be resettled. And resettlement agencies were created after World War II. There were millions, tens of millions of refugees. Of course, Jews, Germans, Hungarians, millions of refugees. All of them were resettled, and they didn't have any more the status of refugee, except the Palestinian refugees. And they show in this book how really this is became the milestone of Palestinian narrative, the narrative of return. And this is the war that they want to inflict upon Israel, not really the idea of two states, but one Palestinian state and another Palestinian states, which will be occupied by 6 million so-called refugees. And the agency that was supposed to be created and dismantled after 3 years, to after it solves this problem, continued until this day. And I thought this is an important story nobody really told from this perspective. And I have to do this because when you see these Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists swarming into Israel, you really ask what was the message they got, how they were used, what they were told that in school that made them do this horrendous act. And that's how I got to that. I said, okay, I called Einat Wilf and I asked her, because I was really busy in doing other projects, and I said to her, please tell me that somebody is doing a film about your study and about UNRWA. And she said, no, not really. And I said, okay, let's come to my office. Let's talk about it and let's find out how we do it. And that's how it started.
Wow.
So it was a few months after October 7th.
So it was October 7th that made you ask the question, why this act of war? Why this act of cruelty from Palestinian organizations like Hamas and Islamic Jihad coming into Israel, committing these atrocities, which is a message of we never want peace. You asked yourself why, and you thought of the book you had read a while ago that gave the answer in your mind. And that book said it's the creation of millions and millions of Palestinian refugees. What started with less than a million grew from generation to generation into millions of refugees. And instead of saying we resettle the group of existing Palestinians refugees somewhere else after the war of 1948, they were kept in Palestinian refugee camps with the promise of return to where the Jews now lived. And
Exactly.
you think that that is in the way of that education and that at the one hand the growth of the number of Palestinian refugees over generations, and at the other hand and not resettling them, and at the other hand the promise of return to the Jew, what is now the Jewish land, that is in the way of a two-state solution. Am I summarizing correct what your thinking is?
Yes, it's fairly there. I think that the idea again, the idea of not resettling uh, refugees after a war. This is a way. It's weaponizing this narrative of return.
So that is usually not
Remember,
what usually doesn't happen after a war.
no, 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 no. I can give you an example because even in this specific conflict, the Arab-Israeli conflict, is that at the same time that 700,000 uh, Arabs lost their homes in this war that they started, more than that, 800,000 Jews from Arab countries were driven out or been expelled in their countries. My family, for instance, my origins from Iraq, my family name is Dawish, and our whole family were driven out. They couldn't take a penny with them, not a penny. My father had to, because he was part of the Zionist movement. He spent 5 years in prison because of that when he was 17. And but they were resettled. They came to Israel and they were resettled. 800,000. No compensation, nothing. They were just driven out and they were taken by the state of Israel. And this is something that you ask yourself why the Arab refugees are still considered by UNRWA actually as refugees. And then you point out to the international community, which UNRWA is the arm of this international community. It is
It's the UN.
what the it's the UN that created it. And it created also at the same time, it created, by the way, another agency called UNRWA just 2 years after that. It was after the 3 years after, sorry, it was after the Korean War. UNRWA took care of 3.1 million refugees, Korean refugees. And after 2 years, it finished its job and it was shut down. It finished the job
What
and
happened? What
that's it.
happened? What happened with the Korean refugees?
They were all
Where
resettled in the different places where they were before. I
and
mean,
where and yeah, different places for
that's
them
what
than where they lived before. And
exactly.
where would you where do you think the Palestinian refugees should have been replaced to, or should be
There
replaced
were,
to?
many of them were before the war. Their leaders said, "Okay, move out, go to Beirut, to Lebanon, to other places. Our armies, the Arab armies, will finish the job, kill the Jews, and then you can come in, go back to your homes and also conquer the Jewish homes that after we finish the job. So I think, they are Arabs, part of the Arab world. They should be resettled there if you want to do a settlement, if you want to get this conflict settled. And this is what was the idea that we were going into these agreements, going into the Palestinian-Israeli peace accords was the idea was land for peace. We're dividing this land. We understand Jews should have their own country, and the Palestinians should have their own state. And this is a bogus. It is not really what the Palestinians want. And to come to this realization, I have to say it's really a painful realization because you always think that people want to find the peaceful solution. You really, I have nothing against Palestinians. I think I have friends who are Palestinians. I think they are very talented people. They can be, the same like Jews. They can live in prosperity. Both people can enjoy a really good life if they really give peaceful peace to each other. But I think that's where, after I read the book, and of course, after I was researching this film and finishing the film, you come to, you open your eyes and you see the way you try to convince yourself in something that really didn't have a stand in reality, and that's a painful point to arrive to.
So, can you explain what to us what is the role of this refugee organization UNRWA in standing in the way of this two-state solution? What does it do to the mind of the Palestinian refugees?
Well, it if it was in the beginning refugee agency that needs to take care of refugees, until they were resettled. Uh, Later on, it became the agency that provides almost everything from relief, food, education, health, all the services that a state needs to be as to give to its citizens. Actually, UNRWA was giving, and it really took uh, this control. It is and still is, well, until October 7th. Yeah. It was a quasi government, definitely in Gaza, somewhat also in big parts of the West Bank, and also responsible to refugee camps in Jordan and Lebanon, Palestinian refugee camps. But really, what it does, it takes $1.5 billion US dollars a year from Western countries' taxpayers, and that's it. Put it in the education system, the health system, and pay for instance, in Gaza, it paid for 13,000 um, employees who are teachers, who are uh, different occupations, but they are all Palestinians. So from the total of 30,000 UNRWA employees, 99% of them are Palestinians. And you should only guess how many were in Gaza from this big number of UNRWA refugees, how many were also members of one of the terrorist groups like Hamas or Jihad, Islamic Jihad or others. And then you understand that the money comes in, and UNRWA became like the biggest employee of Palestinians. The money comes from the outside. People who are working for UNRWA, teachers, lawyers, uh, doctors, nurses, they have affiliation. I mean, you can say, okay, they do have, of course, a national identity, and they work for their statehood. Okay, but if they are in a state controlled by a terrorist group like Hamas, they also have to indoctrinate the public. So, for instance, when you go into UNRWA schools, you see that the indoctrination of young uh, uh, young students uh, is through books that you have the UN stamp on it. And also, what it does really, in effect, is that when you have an UNRWA school and you have the UN flag on top of it, and you have children in the school taught about this terrorist Dalal al-Mughrabi who murdered 35 Israelis in a terrorist attack, and they and she's the a projection of what should be a Palestinian young, how to what to aspire to. Then it gets a legitimacy from the world. Palestinians see that and they say, "Oh, okay, we can. This is what we should do because the world is behind us. The UN is behind us." And that's the problem with UNRWA.
So
That's the
you
main problem.
so you have you seen those books where there's indoctrination, UNRWA
Sure.
school books where there's indoctrination of students saying become a terrorist?
Well, not become a terrorist, but it is in just a second. I have to just a second. My battery's
Okay,
running out. Just a
all right.
second. Okay. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. So
So
so so have you seen
uh,
school books where students are indoctrinated, UNRWA school books where students are indoctrinated to commit terrorism?
well, I was presented by books that you see uh, incendiary examples of how young people, young children can be indoctrinated. It's not like be a terrorist, but if you have a story about Dalal al-Mughrabi, for instance, in the book, this terrorist, and she was a woman, of course, and she's you see her in this very heroic photo, and you're a young girl, and you look at it and you say, "Oh, okay, maybe this is what I should do." And what is the message behind that? The message behind it is that you should kill Israelis, be a hero, fight for your country, and that gets a stamp, a validation by the world, by the UN.
And so it's the UN that in this way is facilitating and stimulating, in fact, a one state solution philosophy in the Palestinian population in those camps, is what you're saying.
I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
it's even more than that. It's the annihilation of the Jewish state.
Yeah.
That's what it means. We
Yeah.
don't want a Jewish state. and we do it through this strategy of driving this idea of this narrative of return.
Do
And
you?
how we do it with this agency, which also continues to suck money from Western taxpayers
Mhm.
and go into these schools. And I think, when you look at it and you see what happened in Gaza and the devastation that happened in Gaza, you understand that with all, with what Hamas did, and definitely you can connect it to this idea of return, because this is what they were when they entered Israel. This was a day of celebration. We're going back to our villages. We're going back to our towns that they chanted when they entered Israel. And when you see the devastation that happened in Gaza, you understand something else. You understand that the biggest victim of UNRWA are the Palestinians themselves. Of course, we are also being victimized by indoctrinated terrorists. But the fact of the matter is, this is the consequences of this such a crazy idea that you can go back, you can do that, you can eliminate the Jewish state, and that was the result, the very, very tragic result.
And so Israel had to respond, and that gave a lot of devastation in Gaza. Yet the cameras are on the devastation in Gaza, and that led to the recognition of a Palestinian state in many parts of the Western world. So,
Yeah,
didn't
I
it
think
help
that
the Palestinian cause in that way?
I don't think so. I think the Palestinians are in a very, very bad shape. Uh, there is the rhetoric, and there's what behind the rhetorics, and I think that the Palestinians are a devastated society. I think they are. They can get all the recognition as a state from everywhere, but they are not. And one of the main things that, if we go back to what damage UNRWA is doing, is that they uh, take from the Palestinians the idea of self-governing. So if you have all your civil um, services given by a quasi state called UNRWA, what do you need? What do you need? Why do you need a Palestinian government? Why do you need another crazy, vicious um, Arab state? I mean, let's stay with UNRWA giving us money. We don't have to work for it. It comes from the world. So this is a very easy easy way for Palestinian uh, the leaders of the Palestinian people to accept. They don't want to govern. They don't want a state. If they will have a state, they will have a lot of problems, because they need to fund what they do. They need to fund these schools. They need to fund these hospitals. They need to collect tax. Hey, why should we take tax? We get it for free.
Okay. So, um, it's easier to stay in the refugee status than to become really a grown-up state, is what you're saying.
Yes, yes,
Um,
absolutely.
so, in your documentary, you really meticulously tell the history of UNRWA, how it came into being, what its original goals were, how it evolved into secondary goals that are unique in the world for in the world of refugees. What is being taught in the schools of UNRWA, etc. You tell that all in your documentary, um, and the title is Unraveling UNRWA. So you analyze it, and you also, I think, you propose to get rid of UNRWA. Is that correct?
I think so. I think that this is it's basically that's what needs to be done. I mean, who needs? Why UNRWA is still existing? I mean, why a temporary agency needs to get every 3 years uh, its mandate renewed? Why? Why is that happening?
Well,
Why there is one? Why there's one? Even there, if there are refugees, why there's only one refugee agency that takes care of only one kind of people? There is UNCHR. It's the UN body agency that takes care of millions, tens of millions of refugees all over the world. Why don't they take care of this? Why the Palestinian has to have their own refugee agency? That's the question. And when you ask the question, this is a really rhetorical question because you say, "Oh, it's obscene, it's abnormal to have 80 years after a war, an agency that takes care of so-called refugees who lives in Sweden or lives in LA or lives in I don't know where, and and this is not really these are not refugees anymore. You cannot be a refugee after 1, 2, 3 years. There's no way that this can continue. This is anomaly. An anomaly must end.
and what should happen instead of keeping UNRWA in place?
I mean, when you go to refugee camps, and we went to refugee camp, for instance, in UNRWA refugee camp in Dheisha, which is, it's a neighborhood. It's not like you think about refugee camp, you think about tents.
Hmm.
It's not tents. It's just like another neighborhood adjacent to Bethlehem, and just like a bit lower class, and just you take off the all you have to do is take the place where it says UNRWA and let them live there normally, continue to live. What they are aspiring is to live their homes that they lived there for 80 years, and with their fantasies of they were working this land that is 18 kilometers from where they live, and they want to go back there. Of course, everybody wants to go back to where he was living. Of course, there's not like, Jews had to leave their property that is, in much bigger scales in everywhere they were driven out from, especially from the Arab countries too. I mean, by the way, after 1948, there were UNRWA had to handle also in the beginning also Jewish refugees. It wasn't created only for the Palestinian
No.
refugees. It was it was called the UN Relief Agency for Palestine Refugees, and there were 70,000 Jewish refugees from that war that Israel resettled in its own borders. They weren't able to go back to their homes.
Yeah. So, um, what you're saying is after UNRWA would have been dissolved, then the Palestinians can stay where they are right now, but they're not in the status of refugees. Um, so
Yeah, I think that if you look at where these 6 million Palestinian refugees live, and you understand that the majority of them live in Western countries. I mean, they have British citizenship, they have Swiss citizenship, they have American citizenship. I mean, if you get a citizenship somewhere else, you cannot be a refugee anymore. Definitely not after 4 generations. So
but the yeah,
why is UNRWA perpetuating this? This is the big question.
yeah. Do you have an answer to that question?
I have an assumption. I
Hmm.
think this is not only it's mixed. Okay, I think that uh, it's not only being naive and not understanding the situation. I think there is there's a Einat Vilf was saying that it was not in the film, but she was referring to this, and she said that the people who are perpetuating or are keeping UNRWA alive, and the people who are heading UNRWA know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it out of their idea that they want to dismantle a Jewish state. But this is an assumption. And when you see the waves of anti-Semitism in the West, maybe this assumption is correct, you know, because why, there are educated people uh, and people we interviewed actually in the film were working at UNRWA. Um, we did an interview with the head of UNRWA in Gaza until 2025. And it was his last interview before he left office. And he was brought after October 7 happened. And he was very candid. He said, this is a flawed agency.
Mhm.
And people has who value the truth would tell you the truth
Mhm.
that this is a flawed, this is an agency that perpetuate the conflict, that perpetuate the idea of victimhood and refugeehood in the Palestinian society.
Mhm.
And the damage that it creates is huge.
Yeah. So, Duki, what do you hope the effect will be of your documentary?
I think we already see the effect. I think that first of all, I would like people to watch it.
Where can they watch
You
it?
know, they can watch it. We have a tour of film festivals and screenings all over the United States.
Hmm.
Uh, we will have in February in Miami and Boca, in Atlanta, in Washington,
Hmm.
Connecticut. We do it also in Toronto, in Paris, in Vienna. Uh, this is only the beginning in Orange County,
Hmm.
and we will have a lot of screenings
Hmm.
because I think that this is a very important film to watch, and people need to understand the conflict. And actually, whoever really want to understand the conflict better must see it.
Yes, I agree with
Also,
that.
it can be also be it's available on VOD online. And if you type unraveling UNRWA.com, you can watch it online.
Okay. That's good to know. So, what do you hope the effect will be if after people watch this documentary?
Well, I think people need to understand the reality of things. And this is part of what I went out to do after October 7th. It's really to reveal the truth and in various ways to reveal the truth because there's so much ignorance. There's so much, people don't really understand what really happened, and they are bombarded by propaganda, anti-Israeli propaganda, and they don't have the tools to really fight it. And people need to know really what is the reality, what was the history like, and have the argument. So in that level, for people, I want to broaden their understanding and knowledge when they are facing anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, anti-Israeli. They can explain, and they have a tool to understand and face charges of this anti-Semitism, and
I
also for yeah,
Go ahead.
for the and I think also it has a very strong impact in the decision-making level. I think that uh, that's really where it can really do a big change. So we are planning a screening in the Congress, in the U.S. Congress, in the Austrian Parliament, in the and we're talking about also in the Scottish. And so really there's also a need and requests, a lot of requests to watch the film. And we
That's
will do also one in at the UN headquarters, of course, and
wow.
invite everybody who can.
Wow. It's I can certainly confirm that it's a very educational documentary. I learned a lot from it about the history of UNRWA, um, and I would recommend everybody to watch this documentary. How has it been received so far at the film festivals, etc.?
Uh, it premiered in the Haifa Film Festival and just a few months ago, 2 months ago,
Hmm.
and it won the best investigative documentary
Hmm.
award. And I think that the reception is quite phenomenal. I think that people really are hungry for this knowledge, for this education,
Hmm.
and see that there's this. Uh, I can tell you about Israelis because mostly I know Israelis' reaction, and I think it again from what I received, people are saying this is an eye opener for them, and many people from the left actually. It's not like for right wingers or something like that. Left wing Israelis are watching this and they just say to me, okay, we're confused. We didn't know that this is really what happened. And you put it in order, you put the story in order, and you made sure also that you bring all sides of the story. I mean, you brought the people from UNRWA, people who are pro UNRWA in the film, people who are against UNRWA in the film. You brought Palestinians in the film, people who are talking and not propagating any idea, but rather telling us a narrative, a story of this agency. So Mostly there was a big sense of appreciation to the film.
That's great to hear. Don't you think it will be canceled in many places, many
Oh, I'm sure, of
documentary
course. I mean,
festivals?
absolutely. I think that still many festivals because I've been as a filmmaker, I've been in many of the A-list festivals. I've been, and I'm sure that I'm going to be in Berlin in 2 weeks. I know that the big, you know, A festivals. Oh, well, I don't know yet. We're still waiting for, the film was just released, so I don't know if it will be canceled really, but I know that they are very worried about screening the film because they are afraid of the consequences. They are afraid of the canceling they will experience. Most of the festival I was in touch with, they said this is a really important film, but we are afraid to
Mm.
screen. We don't know. We have to think. It creates an issue, sometimes also a security issue, and that's, I mean, but we this is our really, I feel my responsibility to to face this and bring the truth. And I think that film festivals, distributors, um, streamers must be brave enough to screen film that bring the truth, even if it's not comfortable to many people.
That will happen, is my guess.
I hope so.
Duki, thank you so very much for making this documentary in the first place. It's really an important one. Secondly, for sharing all this knowledge with us in this interview, and for explaining it so well, and for taking the time to explain us more about UNRWA and the role it has. Um, I wish you lots of good luck with this documentary. Um, I want to thank our listeners for listening. If you want to know more about Never Again Is Now podcast, go to our Never Again Is Now podcast channels on YouTube, Spotify, iHeart, and Apple Podcast. And there you can find more information about past episodes and about my co host and me and the other work we are doing about anti Semitism. Thank you very much. And our, we always close with the request to our listeners, please speak up against anti Semitism and all hate. Thank you.